Good evening, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute or two to make sure that everybody who is logging in can get in and hear me and everyone else tonight. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Very excited to have you here. Just wait another 30 seconds or so. All right, let's get started. Good evening and welcome to the Milwaukee Public Library Book Chat. My name is Beth and I'm the adult librarian here at the East Branch near Lake Michigan in Milwaukee's East Side. My co-host tonight is my esteemed colleague, Amy Walden, who is a librarian from the Good Hope Branch. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves tonight using the chat box, and we are recording, so you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy. You don't have to worry about taking notes for any books that you might want to add to your list. We'll send you all those titles in a couple of days after the program. So without further ado, let's introduce our special guest this evening. Felicia Grossman is the author of historical romance, usually featuring Jewish protagonists and lots of food references. Originally from Delaware, she now lives in the Rustbelt with her family and Scottish Terrier. When not writing romance, she enjoys eclairs, cannolis, and Sondheim musicals. Welcome, Felicia. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm thrilled.
Thank you all so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yay. So where are you coming in from? We're here in Milwaukee and you are in the Rust Belt. A little more specifically, you said.
East side of Cleveland.
Yay.
Yay.
Welcome. And then I don't know where our attendees are from, but feel free to let us know in the chat. Hopefully some of you from here. Yeah, I have been following you for quite a while. Your first book I actually had the pleasure of reviewing for Library Journal when before that came out, so that's really exciting to me that I get to finally
Fun,
chat with
Beth.
you. Yeah, it's been great. It's been great. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself for those that might not know what kind of writer
Sure.
you are and
So I write historical romance. My first series was US set, and it was set in around Wilmington, Delaware, where I'm actually from. Written pre when Biden was president, so we weren't as famous. We didn't have a president back then. But I grew up in Delaware around, and it's a pretty small state, and I grew up around a lot of that sort of history. So I sort of figured out, and I'm Jewish, and I figured out a way to sort of insert myself into all the history I sort of grew up learning about and sort of the world that I was in when I wrote those books. And that was super fun. And then for the series that I have now, the first one that came out back in August, Marry Me by Midnight, that's set. They're also Jewish. They're set in the Jewish community in London, just a similar time period, I guess, to Appetites, because Appetites is 1841. I guess Midnight is 1832. But it was really cool to write sort of a very different community where it was a sort of slightly more established community, slightly larger one than because in the United States, we're talking like 5 people. It's a very, very, very small spread out community, and being able to write sort of the experience in England was interesting too, and that was a lot of fun to do. And because I majored in English and history, so you end
very
up
cool.
going that way.
I appreciate that as a former history major myself.
And she's using her degree. I mean, like it's a total win, Felicia.
Yes, I mean I always say it's a little bit of a hedge because it's technically English and medieval and Renaissance studies, but it was history based. It's a little later than my technical area, with my former area of expertise.
Well,
Hey,
lifelong learning, right?
you have the methodology, but under your belt, that's the
Right.
important part.
And also, people look at you a little strangely when you say, "I majored in medieval and Renaissance studies," in a way that they don't when you say history.
I totally understand that. Oh yes, I have a certificate in Jewish studies from my undergrad program. I am not Jewish, but I don't know.
Beth, I want to know, I'm very curious, like, how did that happen? Were you like interested in like knowing more about like Jesus's background? I mean,
No, not I was interested more in like, I'm like, I was raised Catholic and I was always like, as a historian, I was like, I just wanted to, I really enjoyed how much more inquisitive I could be learning about a different faith. And we just had an excellent set of professors here at UW-Milwaukee that I studied under, and
cool.
I babysat for my Hebrew teacher. I took 2 years of Hebrew because I found it interesting and fun, and I was maybe considering converting at some point, and I did not. So I don't know. It just fit in with my plan, and it was easy to tack on, and it covered a lot of my prereqs that I needed
Visa
to. So
I
requirements.
was like, yeah,
Visa
but also
requirements is
I don't usually hear people say easy and Hebrew in the same sentence. That's
mm-mm. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I was looking to kind of going into like museum studies, and then I ended up going
cool.
just for a general like European history program at Marquette, and it all kind of worked out well. Lots of studying, lots of reading, but I understand that completely. Writing is not your full-time job right now. Is that a dream of yours someday? Or I know you said you're a lawyer in your day job life.
So, I mean, there are appeals to it, but I have such a nice job. I work for local government, and I love everybody I work with here in Cleveland. And it's been just I feel so lucky. I really love still doing this, and I like it. I've been really, really lucky because this is not an easy city to not have grown up in.
Mhm.
And but everybody
Milwaukee's
has
like that too.
Yes,
It's
everybody has been so nice to
well, and that's, it's interesting, Beth. I don't know, are you from Milwaukee?
Yeah. Mhm.
So I'm gonna like get really tribal here, because like in Milwaukee, like I'm from Central New York. I'm from Utica, which if you're from Cleveland, and from
my husband.
Wilmington.
My husband grew up in Buffalo.
Okay, yeah. So
I know you guys.
I moved to Milwaukee, and I expected like that it was going to be like when I moved to when a new Jewish person moves to Utica, like it's a big deal and everybody welcomes them. But in Milwaukee, everybody grew up there and everybody stayed there, and nobody needs you. So it's very tribal, and it took a while. I mean, they're stuck with me now, man. It's been 30, 40 years. But it's not an easy community. And I wondered, Felicia, if you had that experience at all.
Our first landlady told me that she was from Chicago, and she told me it took her 7 years to feel comfortable in Cleveland, even though her husband had gone to high school there. Both my in-laws are from Cleveland, so they moved around. It's kind of like, but I think I felt more at home here. One, because I didn't actually live where in the suburbs where I live now. Originally, I lived downtown with a lot of medical residents and
Mm.
their families. So
Mm-hmm.
they were all not from Cleveland. So we made some really great friendships there. And we were more sort of set career-wise when we moved to the suburbs. So even though it still was not easy, and I'm still closer friends to people who are transplants, if we're couples friends, it was still a lot. We felt more comfortable, I think, when we moved to the suburbs. And I also think with like the Jewish stuff, um, so I always say like in the world of camp, there are a couple of like social status things. There are as my daughter calls them, she calls them these social elites, the gross populars, and then there's the
That's
wannabe
awesome.
populars. Then
What
there's
camp?
the Ramah,
Oh, okay.
and then there's the freaks and weirdos and the floaters. And I've always been one foot in the freaks and weirdos, one camp, one foot in the floater camp. So I kind of went in without any expectations that I was going to be like, well, so I but looking for people without sort of needing to be a certain type of people. So I'd like to, my dad had died and I went to Daily Minion. So I became friends with a lot
Oh,
of the people who go to, and people are like, oh, people are welcome. I was like, they're happy to have you there. If you
Yeah.
show
Oh,
up,
and
if
I'm
you
sorry. So
show
how
up.
long ago was that?
My dad died. My dad died in between when Appetites and Dalliances
Oh,
came out. I promoed, I did RWA 2019, 3 weeks after my dad died, less than 3 weeks after my dad died, signing Dalliances.
wow.
Yeah, that was a very, like, 19 was a very dramatic. I wrote the first draft of Midnight at the end of 19. And like I switched agents and I sold it. So Midnight comes out of that period really. And then I switched agents like right in the beginning of 2020. I was like, 2020 is gonna be such a more better year than 19. 19 was terrible. Like something was like in like March 3rd, 2020.
Oh dear.
Oh yeah.
It's been a roller coaster, huh?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I did not realize your dad had passed that recently. My father passed in 2017, so I feel like the similar, like, it's gonna be great, and then, ugh.
And I think you're similar to you was a glioblastoma, right, as
Yeah.
well?
Yep.
Yeah.
Your
Oh,
father too.
that's
Yep.
so
Yep, my father was diagnosed 2 weeks before Appetites came out. And yep.
oh
It's a
wow.
horrible,
It is
really
awful.
fast, horrible disease. So,
I have a friend whose husband died of that. And yeah, I mean, I guess we can all be in the Dead Fathers Club, but I am the charter member because I was 14 when my dad died.
Oh,
that's so young.
So, but
Yeah, Dead Dad Club sucks, but
it
it's got really
definitely
nice members.
it does have nice
That's what I
Yeah,
say.
my mom died in 2018. So kind of closer to you guys, but
Just a
man,
lot. Well, then that
yeah.
kind of really goes along with this book
With
because,
us,
like,
yeah, with the father, because you're,
with
oh
the
wow,
father
yep.
being passed and then like Cinderella. So what telling me how this like fairy
This
tale
was great. This is like an awesome mashup. I just have to say, it was like, yeah.
okay.
So
Yeah.
where did,
I worked with Amy. We don't work together in person a lot because we work at different library branches, but I was guest starring at her branch to fill in for somebody who was out. And I was like, Amy, look at this book.
well, and
I was like,
Janice brought it. Janice had it on her desk. She's like, look, and I'm like, oh my God, he's wearing a teapot.
I knew you
Usually
guys
they
would appreciate.
usually they're all wearing like they have all got like massive tattoos and stuff, or they're sitting on motorcycles. But I was just like, oh, it's one for me.
Mhm.
And I really I have to just say that I thought it was fascinating the way that you had the Ladino, the Ashkenazic and Sephardic communities. I loved that you had that in there.
Oh,
So
thanks. That was fun to write. And I think people forget like that the sort of Anglo-Jewish world, because you're looking at who's in it now, who is in it now, but like culturally, this is what Western Sephardi Judaism became. It became a lot of the basis of American and British Judaism, especially. I'm part of the conservative movement. I mean, that's what they were, Mendez and Marias were conserving. They were conserving that particular culture. So you get the more Ashkenazi stuff sort of filtered in later, but your base is a lot in these communities and so like I always say, when people talk about Jewish institutions, we talk about Holocaust trauma a lot, but our institutions in the US are older than that, and same in England, and they weren't built around that. They're all built to prevent an expulsion. They're built from the lessons of Spain more than anything else. So even though we forget that that's what we're really experiencing.
well, and English Jews were expelled too. I mean, and
Yes, the first
so
time,
yeah.
and almost the second time in 1730. So they were
So
expelled in 1290, and then they
right.
came back with, well, kind of with Cromwell, but really with William and Mary. And then there was a couple of attempted expulsions. The closest was 1730, but like all these people kind of remember 1731. And then you don't get full emancipation until almost 1860 in England. You get it a lot later than some of the other places. And you still had more other rights, but you don't have the voting rights until fairly late, compared to, like, say, France. Like, France was into that. France was into fraternity, equality, and liberty.
I I just love all of this history so much. And then you bring in this Cinderella fairy tale with that. So what drew you to the fairy tale part?
So I was so Stacey Agdern, who is an author, and
We've hosted her. Yes, she's lovely.
So I was trying to figure out what to write back at the end of 2019, and she kept telling me, because I didn't know what to write, and you went to something. I was Regency because of a variety of reasons, and basically all the ages were like, it's gotta be England Regency is shut. And I was gonna do it Jewish again, and she was like, you need to write your fuzzy blanket book. And for her, that was Miracles in Manila, which is very a specific a Hallmark movie and stuff, and that's her fuzzy, but it makes her really warm and fuzzy. I was like, okay, so what is my fuzzy blanket story? And for me, that was Cinderella. So I decided I was like, okay, I'm going to do a Cinderella retelling, especially when I realized it was somebody else's fuzzy blanket book, because I was reading. So the composer, Rossini, who did Barbara of Seville, was trying to do a follow-up work to it around December. It was in December, and he couldn't think of anything. And Ferretti, who was his librettist there, they wrote a Cinderella. They wrote La Cinderella. So that was their fuzzy blanket story too. About 200 years earlier than what I was writing.
Love that.
It was like same time of year too, but it like sort of represented because it's a story about hope and about sort of kindness and goodness sort of triumphing over everything else. It's a very, very, like, all the Cinderella stories are very hopeful stories. So I was going to write a hopeful story, but then I was going to play with it.
And you did.
You did in such a lovely way.
It was so much fun.
How did Aaron, the main character, form for you? Because he becomes our Cinderella essentially, right?
Well, yeah. So I was like, okay, so
Cinderfella.
so we're going to reverse those roles. Okay, so how would I do this? What qualities of your Cinderella are the most important ones? And for, let's say, I was building a character who was kind, who was above all kind.
Yes, and that really just comes across on page. He's very he lives his values, and then his love and interest is the one that's kind of pushing him to like maybe be a little naughty. And I'm like, I enjoy this very much. And my favorite was the mice. He has like his little animal buddies, and I'm like,
very Disney.
It's very, I was like, okay, so it's like, okay, there are a zillion Cinderellas out there. I'm going to reference as many of them in there. So like, there's definitely some references of both the earlier Disney and the cartoon and the live action. There's references of Grimm. There's references of Perrault. There's a lot of references of the opera. But I also did the musical versions. There's Rodgers and Hammerstein references, and there's Into the Woods references.
And like, it's so fun, like discovering those little
Easter eggs.
As you go through.
Although, I mean, is Easter egg the right thing to?
That's what I just was like.
Jewish. I don't know.
Little hallmarks, little like.
Little afikommens.
Yes,
that's the hidden matzah at the Passover Seder, Beth.
Okay, yes.
We've gone a little. Although, I mean, it's really it's much more fun, I think, to look for chocolate eggs than communion wafers.
But that's okay.
I went to private school, like prep school, and we had an Easter egg hunt every year, and it was always during Passover. So like I was allowed to hunt for the eggs, but I had to give them all away.
Oh, that's so mean. That's so
you
hard.
Couldn't save them until after Pesach was over?
No, I couldn't bring them home. My mom had me give them away.
Oh my gosh,
Oh,
that's so
To look for them.
sad.
So I had a chat where I was like, I mean, I think it's in certain ways terrible, but in certain ways I'm like, okay, so you can like understand that some things are nice to admire for other people, but they're not necessarily, not everybody think everything has to be for everybody. But yeah, my mom felt really, really strongly on that, which is really funny because my dad's family was assimilated back in Europe. And so my dad and my grandmother and such and great grandma all grew up getting a very large Easter egg on Easter. And I got it once. I still remember it had these pretty candy flowers. And my mom was like, no, never again.
And you're like, but it's pretty. So
And I remember how
tasty.
beautiful it was. But no, you have to wait till after you get, and hopefully it will line up so that all the candy will be 75% off.
Right. I was gonna say you get
Hey,
it half
that's
price.
a win.
Right.
That's a win
There you
too.
go.
Oh my goodness, I love that so much.
One of the things I want to talk about Isabel for a minute,
hmm
because I love that you made her kind of, she's got a real sense of entitlement, which I just love, but she's constrained by the world she lives in. But that doesn't stop her from being within the boundaries of that, like, man, she is gonna do that princess thing. And not a Jewish English princess thing, but like the prince of.
Well, I think to have one of those balls, you have to be a very confident person. And well, so like when I conceived her as sort of like your real big deal alpha duke in that archetype. And I was like, okay, so how can I make that work for a Jewish woman? And I think she's very well aware of her limitations, but she's able to also be a beast. Because she does have so much, her family is insulated by the money and the status, at least in the community. There's, again, if we talked about the gross populars before, there are people above the gross populars that don't even, and she's one of those.
Well,
Whereas she can do whatever she sort of wants within those bounds, and has a pretty secure, loving family that lets her do that.
And kind of two dads.
Yes.
Which I loved. I loved that was awesome. That whole, I was like, yes.
And the like dagger and the sword fighting practice was like, yes, I love that very much. And I don't want to call her an unlikable. I know we talk about unlikable heroines a lot in the romance community, and I don't even want to toss that out there because your description more of like being this alpha duke style character within the constraints, like that speaks to me as a historical romance reader so much. Just like, oh yeah, I could very easily see a classic duke doing like, yes, I'm going to have a ball to like find myself my perfect match, and it's all for business, and I'm going to wear all the best things and like put on a show, and it was just so much fun to see that, and then see her in her night rail in the garden and kind of letting loose and enjoying herself a little bit. And like, you had me like sweating these two. I was like, how is this gonna work out? I was like hiding my book under my pillow. Like, I'm getting nervous. So good job. I loved it. I read in another interview that you did that you took this idea of kindness triumphing, like you referenced already, and the traditional trappings of idealized Jewish masculinity, with this emphasis on being scholarly and smart for Aaron as well. And I love that he was smart in his way, but he wasn't like book smart. So that really was great.
I wanted him to be enough as he was. I mean, and I think then that doesn't happen I think in romance for a lot of male characters in general, especially in male-female romances, that they need to offer something else. And I didn't want him to need to. I wanted it to be being a caretaker and being a good person to be valuable enough on its own, especially paired with someone like her who has everything already.
Yes, absolutely. I this is just such a fun story. So I don't want to spoil too much for people who haven't read it, but you should definitely put it on hold or go buy it right now. It's Mary Be My Midnight. You have another one coming out in April. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I want to hear about that.
I do. So in April, we have Wake Me Most Wickedly coming out, and that book is starring Saul Weiss from Marry Me by Midnight as the
I
hero
was
of
hoping
Delaware.
so.
Saul's book. I drafted this one right after Midnight went out on sub because I wanted Saul to have a book because I fell in love with Saul.
And for those that don't know, that is who Isabel is kind of courting
She's
kind of
thinking
throughout.
he might be like the ideal husband material that she's yeah, he might like she's got his resume is on top of the pile actually for a lot of the book.
Yes. And he's not a bad person, like so often, we'll read where like, oh, the potential other love interest is just horrible. And like this was not the case. So I'm very excited that, he's getting his happily ever after because I did like him a lot too. So
he was fun. He was very fun to write. But in the end, he had a different name originally. I changed it to Saul Weiss, knowing that he was going to be Snow White.
Oh,
It's
yay.
super fun. I mean, it's a much darker book because Cinderella's hope. Snow White is about jealousy. It's my first one with like a real villain in it because that's a book that needs one of those. So that was really fun and really interesting to write. It was interesting to be able to write an evil queen figure and with a male protagonist, Snow White, because then you have to decide why is he hanging out in the evil queen's castle this entire book. So you have to write that. So that was really fun to figure out. And as I like to say that Isabel was my Alpha Duke. Hannah in this one is a bad boy.
Ooh, and she's like kind of a huntswoman.
Huntswoman, yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yes, my editor had to explain to marketing that everybody's doing Snow White and the Huntsman anyway. That's how we do. That's how that gets retold these days. Everybody likes to do that. So that's how we're doing that. She's really interesting. I liked writing her because a lot of her family background is close. He was decently close to Ike Solomon's, in a much more realistic way than people like Dickens used him. So, and sort of this book in many ways is a response to that sort of stereotype in sort of a much more realistic how those people really actually are and not sort of the stock villains that they become in a lot of English literature.
I also will show everyone the covers when we get back to the slides. And you had a big cover reveal in EW, and I was like screaming. It's so good.
I had to explain in text why he was wearing a kippah in bed. Comment on that in the book. That's like it looks great on the cover, but it's weird in real life. So I had to make like
a little like backstory.
I have to not explain, at least quasi explain it and have people remark on it.
Well, wait a minute. And a kippah in bed, like, are there bobby pins involved here? Because I just don't see how it's staying on. If there's anything going on, it's not working for me at all. I can't see it.
It works. It works. It might
I believe
come
you.
off
I'm
later.
just trying to figure out like how this. Yeah, I'm gonna have to read this book. Obviously,
know how I'm assuming they use pins like them. Is what it's interesting because again, the small leather ones that we use now, that was the style that also people wore hats. People wore hats.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, and the crochet ones. I mean, everybody. Like when you were at camp and you were crocheting kippot for everybody, you always had crocheting with the bobby pins. You had the bobby pins.
Yes, that's true.
Put them on. So,
but I was it's very steamy cover, and I like it very
It's a
much.
very steamy
Can't
cover.
wait to see the steamy cover.
Very steamy.
Yeah, so we're
It's
very
also
excited.
well, we had to do it that way too because class-wise, she doesn't have pretty dresses in this book at all. So that's why we're sort of like state of undress. So there's no fabulous, there was never going to be a fabulous dress.
Nope, like it's not possible. Oh goodness, so much fun. I love that. Let's see. I just had one more question for you. I had read I do my research, before I interview everyone. And in another interview, you were asked what was the first non-traumatic Jewish fiction story that you ever read? Because, we're romance readers, writers. I turn to these things because I like the hope and the happily ever after. And, I will admit my first encounters with Jewish protagonists in fiction were trauma books. And that doesn't always tell the whole story. So what was your first
I'm
Holocaust
pretty sure
related book?
I'm not sure because is that not true? I'm probably sure I probably said Out of Many Waters in that interview, which is the Jacqueline Dunbar Green one. It's middle grade.
Mm-hmm.
My mom read it to me, and it is about the first group of Jews that ended up in the United States. They're from Recife, which was a Dutch colony in Brazil before it got taken over by the Portuguese. And then this is post-Portuguese Inquisition. And so all the Jews had to leave for Amsterdam. And there was a single ship that ended up getting hijacked by pirates. And eventually they end up in dropped off in New Amsterdam, not in Amsterdam. And that is the first sort of permanent group of Jews in the United States. And it follows a girl who's around 12, who's a Jewish girl who was kidnapped from her parents and lived in a monastery with her sister. And she was a stowaway on the ship as they were trying to see if their parents were in Amsterdam. And she ends up staying with these. And there's a little bit of middle grade romance in there.
I love that.
And it was, and and this was a character that sort of looked like me too. And you can sort of imagine going to a sort of Delaware private school. Not a lot of people back in those days, particularly in the sort of mid to late 80s and early 90s. So and it was one of my absolute favorite books growing up, and it was Jewish historical fiction.
Mm-hmm. I love it. What an urchin story. All right. I'm gonna bring our slides back up and we asked Felicia to bring some additional reading recommendations for everyone, and then we'll show everyone those beautiful covers too. So just give me 1 second. And then again, I forgot to remind everyone, if you have questions, you can go ahead and throw them in the chat or Q&A.
And I'll monitor the chat too if anybody has questions.
Where's my shared screen? There it is.
Yeah, Beth knows so much, Felicia, and she's really the romance person. I mean, she's the person in the system that all of the rest of us turn to for recommendations. So I'm always happy to tag along when she asks me to do these.
Yes, I'm like, Amy, come on. Okay, so these are 3 of your books. So the first one I read by you is Appetites and Vices and Dalliances and Devotion, which are set in the United States. They're really great. We have them, I think, digitally and in paperback, so you can put them on hold. We'll give you the links when we do that follow-up email. Dalliances and Devotion is kind of my favorite. Before Marry Me by Midnight, I just love that kind of cross-class. They end up in a cave and there's danger, and it's so good. And she's like a girly girl fashion and makeup writer during that time. Am I correct?
They're stranded in Pennsylvania, and they sort of follow the route that the current Pennsylvania Turnpike is.
It's so much fun.
The Pennsylvania Turnpike. You'll pass through basically a lot of what they go through.
Beautiful. And then here's the much hyped cover for Wake Me Most Wickedly, which I just love. Can't wait. And April
Oh,
9th.
okay. Okay. All right. I can okay. I can see the keep how works actually, but it's not going to be on for a while. It's not going to be on for long. She's going to be running her fingers through that hair, and that thing's going to be on the floor.
I also I read in the EW article she wasn't originally holding an apple because they forgot to bring one to set for the shoot. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was apparently an avocado, and they did the apple.
Hilarious.
Beautiful. That's so good. Okay, and then what
wait,
recommendation?
go
wait.
back, Beth. Look at a shining star in historical romance.
By Joanna Shu.
How could you pass that by? That's
Well,
awesome.
Very kind quote by Joanna.
Mazel tov.
And Joanna Shupe is great.
Yeah,
Another one of my
amazing.
faves. Yeah. Pick her up too. It's great. All right. So I just picked these 3 covers, but you have a few more. If you would like to run through recommendations, go ahead.
Okay, so we talked about Stacy before. This was her latest, The B'nai Mitzvah Mistake. It's a contemporary romance. Judith and Asher, they are Judith was never bat mitzvahed as a child, but she went to a synagogue that didn't do bat mitzvahs, and Asher is a hockey player, and it never happened. And they meet in an adult B'nai Mitzvah class and end up with the same date. And it's very, very cute. And it's very, very fun. And I really love that it also talked about how, like, you don't if it doesn't happen you're 13, they do, like, this was a big thing, especially in sort of the 80s and the 90s, when a lot of people my mom's age and who hadn't been bat mitzvahed wanted, and their kids were being bat mitzvahed, got to do it themselves, often as groups. And it's always a really nice thing in the conservative and reform movements. And Stacey did an awesome, really fun, cute book about that. Kissing Kosher by Jean Meltzer. That's a really fun, and there's like a lot of
Rugelach on the cover.
Yeah, so like if you know, Stacey's like an exception. Bevel knows that, like, a lot of my recommendations are enemies to lovers, rivals to lovers books. That's literally what I like. That's this. They're feuding bakery families. He's kind of a corporate spy. She also happens to have a chronic illness. They fall for each other. It's very sort of poignant, but it's also really funny. And it's a lot of fun. And then
thanks, Amanda. That's a great option. Thank you for that.
Yes. I love bananas. Yes.
Yep. Points are bananas.
Okay. So Diana Quincy's The Duke Gets Desperate. First of all, so I got into historical romance for the covers like, I remember the wire rack by the checkout in our library of those, and how I wanted every single one of those dresses. I remember looking at this cover and being like, this would have been my book. I would have like petted this book forever. And the actual story, Diana's an amazing writer. The story doesn't disappoint. It's so she, Rhea, is the niece of our hero's stepmother, and she basically inherits his house, his castle. and he's not pleased. He's not pleased about it. And I mean, she's not really happy there either. She's actually Arab American and has come to England because of this. She was pushed out of her family's business by her older brother. And sort of is a little bit not knowing what she wants in life, but she's not going to be pushed around by him. And they are definitely rivals.
They are button heads.
They butt it. It is very adorable, very sexy. There's a murder mystery in this too, and I love a murder. I really love a murder mystery, and it's like, you would think that's like too much plot, but it is not too much plot. It balances really well. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I've read this one just recently, and yeah, I was like turning the pages because the village thinks he murdered like the stepmother, and now his castle got like taken away, and you're like, oh, but he's like, you might own the castle, but I still own the land around it, so how are you gonna pay for it, huh? And they're just so mean, and it's so good. Good. All right. Those were your three. So let me flip to Amy because I always make Amy bring some too.
She
So
does.
Amy, what do you got?
So actually, Very Valentine is in my car right now, and I am just loving it. It is pure, wonderful fluff. But I'm learning a lot about like fashion because I'm kind of, you can't really see what I'm wearing, but I'm not a fashion like person, and I like it. I'm not gifted that way. And this woman, Valentine, comes from a family. She's a third generation shoemaker. They make custom wedding shoes in New York. Um, and she's the funny one in her family. She's 34. She's not married. She's but she's in love, sort of figuring out like being in love with this restaurateur, and they're both really dedicated to their work and they're trying to balance things out. And she's just gone on this buying trip where I'm in the book to Italy with her grandmother who owns the factory, and she's her apprentice. And her boyfriend is supposed to meet her on Capri, and they're going to have this like romantic week. And he bails because the New York Times is going to come and review his restaurant, and then his investors get God knows what. So the last I left, she was busy kissing a 50-year-old, and then ran out on him. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be an HEA. But it's really fun watching this and getting there. The
Little
Mitford,
messy.
yep, the Mitford affair is history. It's not romance, but it's really, really interesting, and it's a not well, it is kind of romance. Um, do you guys know who the Mitfords are?
Kind of.
So the Mitford sisters were, gosh, like imagine six Taylor Swifts in England, around the turn of the century, but not the turn of the century, actually later than that. So between the wars, like World War
Okay.
One and the run up to World War Two, and this affair is about Nancy, who is a writer and kind of more of a socialist, more socialist, more anti-Nazi than Nazi, and her sister Diana. Yeah, Diana. Her sisters Diana and Unity, who become enamored with Hitler. And Diana divorces her husband Brian Guinness of like the Guinness beer fortune
Oh.
to run off with the head of the British Union of Fascists, Oswald Mosley. And so this is a novel based on their actual lives, and I've read a lot of their of nonfiction about the Mitfords. It's just a really, really good book. And then 12 Months in a Day, have any of you guys read that?
Mm-mm.
This is a great romance. You guys will love this
Okay.
romance. Okay. So, basically, well, they weren't married. So the one couple that would have been married, but he dies, and then the other couple who are married, and she dies, and then the ghosts get their living spouses together.
Oh,
That's so
that's sweet.
cute. That's very
But
sweet.
it is, and it's set in the United Kingdom too. So
Okay.
oh guys, you should read this book.
Okay.
It's so good.
I would have not picked it up just on the cover because I was like, it looks sad. Like, it'll rip my heart out. But if it ends in a
But it'll put it
HEA,
back
I will
together. There's an
be
H. Oh, there's a total HEA.
perfect. Then I will read that for sure.
I like ghosts. I like
Yeah,
ghosts.
I do. Oops.
Yeah,
Oops.
yeah. Oh, oh no. Oh, I can't wait, Beth. I love hearing what you're reading.
Okay. So I picked these three delights for you. Do Your Worst by Rosie Danon. She's one of my fave contemporaries. This one comes out tomorrow, so you can put it on hold and get a copy really fast. If you like the movie The Mummy, in the kind of that antagonistic vibe between the librarian and the fantastic Brendan Fraser. This book has that same dynamic. There's a little bit of magic. She's an occult expert and he's like a disgraced archaeologist, and they have to do like a sex ritual, like banish some like thing, and it just sounds bananas. And
Hilarious. Is
yes,
it bananas? That sounds
yes,
funny.
and it's just a light paranormal tinge throughout. So I'm excited about this one. She also wrote the delightful, the title's eluding me. I'll include it in the notes, but it's about a woman who is, coming into her Judaism, and she falls in love with the rabbi, and she used to be an adult film star, and it's just very, very good. Very good book. Rosie's delightful. And then I had to pick Sailor's Delight by Rose Lerner. So this is a queer historical romance, and he is a bookkeeper. I like that it is a more working class historical romance. So it's a bookkeeper and like a naval, what was the title? He's like a Na English Navy sailing master, and the sailing guy has won some prize, and the bookkeeper needs to file the paperwork so he can have enough money to get finally married to his childhood person that he's been engaged to, but he doesn't seem really keen on actually getting married, and all these like unfortunate events keep him from filing the paperwork, and then oops, they fall in love. He doesn't seem like he wants to marry her. He wants to be with him. So just really great and delightful. And the main character is Jewish in this, and it's just awesome. And then I recently read Business or Pleasure by Rachel Lynn Solomon, and this one was about a ghostwriter who her whole career is ghostwriting other people's books. So she gets hired to ghostwrite for this former teen heartthrob, was on like a popular like paranormal werewolf teen show, and then turns out he was actually her one night stand anonymous after at the bar, and he was terrible in bed, and she is like, I don't know if I can write this guy's book because we have had sex. But they decide, they're gonna keep it business. But then, as their tour, she's supposed to like follow him along on he goes to all the, nerd conventions, and she travels with him to like get a sense of who he is and what kind of story she needs to write. And then he's still really bothered that she said he was terrible. So they decide to practice. And it's just really funny, and the banter was really good, and it was hot. So I recommend all three. Very fun times. Cool. And then if anyone has any questions, please do drop them in now. We're just going to run through a couple library business things, and then we'll come back. We do want to let everyone know the Americans in the Holocaust exhibit just opened at Central Library. It runs through January. Is that correct, Amy? I forgot to put the dates.
So.
Yeah, so the exhibit is at the Central Library. You can visit it anytime Central is open. It's really compelling, and it talks about what did Americans know and what more could have been done, which is still a very timely conversation and definitely worth your time. There's also a huge amount of programming going on with this event, so do check out mpl.org to find out more. Then I always have to toot the book sale. There's one coming up on Friday, December 2nd. I like going so I can find old romance books. It's my favorite thing to do. And they always have really awesome things, and all the money goes to the Friends of the Library. And it's a great way to go get some, holiday gifts for those hard to find gifts for people. That's on a Saturday. And then Amy, do you want to talk about your program?
Yeah, so I got to go to the Yiddish Book Center last year with 28 other librarians from around the country, and we're all doing these different iterations and different things with our Stories of Exile reading groups. And my next one is coming up on Sunday. I'm just going to tell you guys, there are no HEAs in this series of books. They're
It's okay.
really and they're also really, really, really dense. So don't feel like you're obligated to, but I just want you to be like aware that, it's happening. And it's cool. We had the first one, having the second one on Sunday. I did it on Sunday afternoons. And so basically it's sort of bagels and really hard conversation and therapy and conversation. And for after this meeting and then the one in January, we're going to actually get a tour of the museum's exhibits. And right now and you should go to the museum anyway, just don't even worry about Stories of Exile, but the Jewish Museum, right now the exhibit is called Women Pulling at the Threads of History. And it's women fiber arts and just really, really fabulous stuff. Like there's Judy Chicago's is there and all these other amazing artists and artwork and local artists too, and political stuff and social stuff. So there you go. Bagels, therapy, books, art.
Perfect combination.
Right.
All right. And that's all of our slides. Let me take those away. And then we will, of course, send you all of this information in a follow-up email. So don't fret. And yeah, any questions that we have let me scroll back through here.
Amanda had the title of the book that you didn't remember.
Oh, The Intimacy Experiment. There we go. You talk about these things and it's like, I just loved it. And then all the details gone.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oop, and someone has Sailor's Delay in their TBR. Fantastic. Very good. And I'm just looking through my last. Let's see. Do you have any fun library stories you want to share with us before we say goodnight? I like to ask that question of all my guests.
Good question.
I will say, so I guess the most, I'm not sure it's fun, but so I love library. I mean, we went to the public library a lot. We went to our school libraries a lot, and so my mom is sort of like a book snob, and she's not a genre fiction person. I think partially her parents owned a news store, and they sold mostly genre fiction, which is what I like. I've always liked it, and so I would sort of scurry in those areas. But my high school had this. It's sort of like was the sort of the fun women's fiction of the 90s and of the 90s. A book called After All These Years by Susan Isaacs. It was a mystery, and like her husband's divorcing her, and after 25 years, and he ends up like dead on her kitchen floor, and she goes on the run to like solve the mystery and everything. I read it so many times that the mass market paperback at my school was destroyed, and they gave it to me.
That's beautiful.
That's great.
They were like, here you go.
So you've earned this.
My 14-year-old self was like, I am definitely a 45-year-old divorcee on Long Island going into the city to solve my husband. This is what I relate to. This is who I am.
That sounds very much like the perfect thing for a bookish 14-year-old. I love it. We get a lot of questions here, like, is this appropriate for my child? I'm like, I don't know. Is it? Like, you don't want to know what I was reading when I was 12, 13, 14.
I mean, she's a high school English teacher, and she definitely sleeps with a former student.
You're like, oh. You look back, you go, huh.
Like somebody age appropriate, but after all the affairs her husband had, the sleeping with the student is amazing. And you're like, yes, you go, Rosie.
Go, girl. Go, girl. We support women's wrongs. It's fine.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. That's the best. Where can everyone keep up with you? What's the best way to follow along with your epic work so they can make sure to get their hands on all your books?
Felicia Grossman, author.com, my website. You can also sign up for my newsletter. I have this past one was the first part of a 4-part serial novella prequel to Marry Me by Midnight. And so there's news and fun stuff like that in there. I'm on Instagram at Felicia Grossman author. I'm once in a while on TikTok. My children really don't want me to be. Also, I'm on Facebook as well. But the website is good, and like, yeah, and I'm I'm very proud of my little fun little novella
What's
set.
the title?
That one is called Stop Me at Sunrise, even though nobody speaks Yiddish in that. Because so when when Forever was trying to get a title for Wake Me Most Wickedly, they came to me with Seduce Me by Sunrise, which, as you know, Lisa Kleypas has a Seduce Me at Sunrise, which is the second book in a series where Midnight is the first. I was like, no. I'm like, I know we're allowed to do that, but we can't. We can't. We need something different. And so, but they went into the alliterative and stuff, and they were big on the S. So the entire
Oh my God.
that was my sister's joke title.
That's hilarious.
I'm glad you're doing that. I'm very excited.
Okay, wait, I have to tell you a joke. You said joke title. So, you know the book You by what's her name? I forgot her name. This is terrible. Anyway,
I know you're, yeah.
Okay, Carolyn Kepnes.
Yes.
So it turns out that Carolyn Kepnes and I have the same friend in common who died last year at 93. And Beverly and Carolyn were really close. I think Beverly took care of her or something when she was a kid. And so she did You, and she was writing the second book, and she said, what should I call it? And Beverly said, fuck you.
You're like,
so now, I don't remember what the second book was, but when we got at the library, but whenever I look at that book, I always think, I know what your real title is.
well, I love all of this. But yes, you can get Strip Me at
Sunrise. Strip Me at Sunrise.
Yeah, sign up for my newsletter. If you hadn't, there will be the second part coming out at the end of this month. If you haven't signed up before, we'll have the link to the first two in the second. So you'll be halfway through. Really fun. I got to set in Livorno in the 1780s. Lots of fun, and it's cute.
I love this. Yay. Well, I just want to again say thank you so much for your time and joining us.
This desk shift.
Yes. Bye, Amy.
Bye.
And we'll keep apprised with your work. Maybe we'll have you in the future. Thank you again.
So
have a good night, and thanks everyone who's here. You'll see an email from us in a couple of days. I have to ask them to upload this to YouTube, and we'll get everything sorted. All right, thank you. Everyone have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye, Felicia.